work session. And roll call shows what it shows. And so we will dive right in. Number 3, Southwest Baxter Study, RFP review.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'd like to take the opportunity to go over the Southwest Baxter RFP proposal. And this item is on your regular council agenda, on the consent agenda, so this is an opportunity for us to describe a little bit the action item that's on the regular agenda and for the council to ask any questions of staff moving forward. So just wanted to take a couple minutes to just kind of recap very briefly the RFP, some of the highlights on what we were asking of the request for proposal, and then outline the proposals and what staff's recommendation is this evening. So we did send out a request for proposal for the Southwest Baxter, specifically the Mississippi River Overlook park property for an open space master plan and community use policy. We did send out that RFP and it was advertised on July 27th and proposals were due on September 7th. We did receive 3 proposals and I'll go through those proposals in a minute. But before I do that, just wanted to take a few minutes and just outline what we're expecting out of the study moving forward with a consultant moving forward. Specifically, there are a number of different kind of project categories within the master plan study that we're hoping to achieve. The first one being civic engagement. There's a lot of different elements to this that we're hoping to accomplish with this study, and specifically to involve all sorts of different people to engage related to the property moving forward, so that the master plan represents the community and surrounding areas best that it can. So we've got very specific outreach groups that we're interested in working on with surrounding property owners, recreational interest groups, and the like. So there's a lot in there that we're expecting moving forward with public meetings, opportunities for the public to comment, and other means as well moving throughout the study process. Ultimately, the expectation is that a study report gets prepared and ultimately adopted for Southwest Baxter that includes a number of different things, one of which would be a open space master plan. So that's the opportunity for the city to outline goals moving forward for the property, possible improvements, and a lot of things that are outlined below here that I'll talk about relate back to the master plan. Things like cost of those improvements, estimated costs and maintenance costs to keep up those improvements, things like that will really help the city moving forward with, you know, what the dream is for the property, so to speak, and what those costs would be, outlining potential grant opportunities. So there's that open space master plan element in the report. There's also a large section of this RFP relates to a community use policy. As the council is aware, we already had a interest group coming forward for utilizing trails in the winter. And with use requests like that, which are wonderful, they also create challenges for us, and we have to think through things. So the community use policy is designed to have the consultant guide us through a process that develops a policy that better equips the city to handle those requests, those types of requests moving forward. There's also an element to the study to evaluate public roads. Of course, we have roads going through the open space property, and we want to make sure we're addressing roads and utilities to service the residents that are surrounding the property, and make sure that that is all planned as well. I mentioned improvement and maintenance costs. With the property being so big, it would be easy to establish improvements that would cost the city a lot of money, not just in initial construction, but also potentially ongoing maintenance. So we want to make sure the master plan is mindful of considering those maintenance improvement costs moving forward. Of course, we also want to make sure we're considering ADA with any of the proposals that get put into the master plan. Another large category that we want to have the consultants review as part of the open space study is the Camp Berkeley State Veterans Trail that's outlined as a goal in our comprehensive plan. And we want to evaluate possible locations for that Veterans Trail as being potential on the property. The Camp Berkeley State Veterans Trail published document outlines a number of different possible corridors cutting through Baxter in an east-west fashion. And one of those corridors is cutting through the open space property that we have. So we want to further evaluate that. And then just some general data collection information on evaluating information about the property, its natural resources, its amenities, forest management. We have some good forest management documents to start. We want to integrate what we already know together with what we can learn through this process. Public maps, we want to make sure that the public maps that get created are usable by the city moving forward. There's another section on use analysis. We want to make sure that an evaluation is put forward that basically describes the uses that get planned in the master plan. What's the potential for their use? Are they supported? Is it something that is recognized as a good idea, but what's the use potential of that idea? So just evaluating some of the use analysis to go with the master plan items. And then funding and implementation strategies. As we define different improvements on the land, how can we possibly fund those moving forward through various grants or other ideas? So that's just a recap of the RFP. As I mentioned, we did receive 3 proposals, specifically one from Bolton and Mink, one from Hoisington Kobler, and one from SRF. The 3 proposals are outlined in your packet and memo. The costs associated with each of those proposals. Staff took a look at those proposals, we reviewed them, and are making a recommendation to support the SRF proposal this evening for a total cost not to exceed $74,923.50. The other 2 proposals, one from Hoisington Kobler was in an amount of $131,800, and the proposal from Bolton and Mink was in the amount of $80,064. So the SRF proposal is the low price proposal that is in front of us this evening. The price was certainly a factor that went in with staff's review and recommendation for this evening, but there are other factors that as well that went into that, and I've outlined those in the staff report. Happy to answer any questions that you have about those other factors. Things like evaluating the natural resources into 3 different categories, and there was just a minor difference in the amount of options of the master plan, where SRF is proposing 3 options within the master plan for the city's consideration, and so that was certainly a factor as well. Just did want to note that the Bolton and Mink proposal was very close in price and in services provided to the city. They were very close, but in the end, based on our review, we're recommending the SRF proposal this evening on the regular agenda. One other thing I just wanted to mention briefly for the council's knowledge is that we also intend to apply for, we've already drafted, and one item on your agenda tonight is related to a resolution supporting a grant application. So we're submitting grants to the Initiative Foundation as well as Sourcewell. And if those grants are approved, it would reduce the city's overall cost to $59,923.50 if both of those grants are funded. So we will proceed with those grant submittals following the council meeting tonight, and move forward with those if the consent agenda is approved. We'll have the authorization to do that. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions on this item.
Council questions of Josh or staff? Pretty big undertaking. The groups that will be
Yeah, so we're envisioning that the Parks and Trails Commission will be front and center, as well as utilizing the Long Range Planning Commission. Of course, the council has to be part of the process all the way through as well. But I think the Parks and Trails Commission is the main commission of review for the study. Although the interest groups that we're trying to get outreach from, whether it be citizens, property owners, recreational groups. There may be separate meetings that are set up that we'll have to further evaluate the details of the public civic engagement process, but we definitely plan to utilize those commissions as well. And there's 9 meetings, I think, in the proposal that we're recommending that they're planning to account for, which is 2 presentations to the city council. So there's a number of meetings left over for that civic engagement and commission piece as we go through. And the study is intended to be, 6 to 8 months in terms of a process to give us plenty of time to have that civic engagement process, let the plan evolve, give the community ample opportunity to participate and kind of grow this into a community plan.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, move on to our second agenda item. Review of the city development policies.
Okay. So, looking at the city's development policies, this is the title of this presentation is Municipal Services Memo. Memo is attached to your staff report. I'd like to go through that, try to cover all of the points in the memo so that we can kind of explain what we've put together here. Basically, at the October 5th meeting, we did get a request from Tom Bircher, who came to the city council to speak on behalf of his properties. Tom also wrote a letter that requested a number of things from the city, specifically requesting an amendment to the city's regulations to allow his properties on Inglewood and Pine Beach Road to be developed with well and septic. They are commercial properties, and the suggestion was that once the development is established in this area with well and septic, then the city within a given amount of time could come back and require the urban utilities within that certain amount of time. So the city did look into this and has an evaluation that we'd like to just go through with you tonight. Before I get into that, I just wanted to show the council Mr. Bircher's properties, specifically on Inglewood and Pine Beach Road. They're the properties outlined in blue, in the blue shading. So Inglewood is kind of in the center of the page in north-south, and Pine Beach is off the north end of the map here. So there's 5 total properties. He did also own this property to the southwest, but that has sold a while ago and now has a home on it. Looking at basically this request, we wanted to evaluate the request that was heard in early October, but also the council's asked us to periodically review its policies, and this is an opportunity for the city to really go over the policies of urban services. And so that's what we're trying to summarize. It's a lot to summarize, but we're going to try to summarize tonight so that we can kind of describe basically the city's system and how it works, so that you can consider Mr. Bircher's request as well. So the goal of this information, the goal of tonight is to provide the council with this background and see if the city wants to move forward with any changes or not. Looking at the city's development policies, when you start with the policies, really the foundational plan, planners refer to the comprehensive plan as the city as, if you're going to compare it to a structure, it would be the foundation of the structure. That's the city's comprehensive plan, and the comprehensive plan is the foundation, because cities take a long time to develop those plans. I think our last comp plan update was, I think we took 3 years to develop that plan. And that comprehensive plan sets the baseline to which all the other regulations that cities have are built upon that. So your zoning ordinance, your policies would be the walls and roof of the structure, so to speak, in that comparison. So first, starting with the comprehensive plan, the comprehensive plan does talk about infrastructure in a number of areas. I've outlined those here. Specifically, there's a policy statement in the comprehensive plan that states that the city should continue to require that all commercial, industrial, office, and mixed-use development is connected to city sewer and water services. I just highlight the word continue because it's not, I think the last time we updated our comprehensive plan was in 2015, and that was a comp plan update. It wasn't the city's first comprehensive plan, and so referencing that the city shall continue that explains that we've been requiring city sewer and water for a long time before 2015. But it is stated as a policy within the comprehensive plan to have sewer and water services for commercial development. The comprehensive plan also talks about the city's development approach. Obviously, we're a very actively developing community. We have a lot of development each year. And so the plan talks about our approach and how that's to be allowed. Specifically, it talks about a couple of priorities for development review, with the first being to allow infill development as a first priority. So those are opportunities within the city's existing urban infrastructure system that might be vacant and ready for development. We want to support those types of infill developments first because it relates to an efficiency of utilities and systems. The second priority is to allow development into the growth areas when the development is next to an existing urban area with city services, provided that there is an orderly and efficient staging of public infrastructure. So basically developing in an inward-out fashion from the city's core and developing on that edge. Specifically, one of the things that the development approach also talks about is that developments with public improvements beyond that urban edge could be considered premature, as it wouldn't have a sequential staging of those utilities. Even if a developer pays for those utilities, that's referred to as leapfrogging, where you go well beyond the infrastructure and you may bring utilities or you may bring a transportation system, but it's the entire system that's necessary potentially to support development. It could be utilities, it could be the transportation system, and all of those things carry with an efficiency related to the city's costs in developing a city. So that whole growth approach is to go inward out and develop inward and then on the fringes. So that's all described in the comprehensive plan. Additionally, in the comp plan, we have a sanitary sewer plan, and we have a separate water plan, and we have a growth areas plan, and all those are in your packet this evening. I'm not going to go through those plans, but each one of those shows the expansion area for our infrastructure and where those areas can be. The plans all identify a boundary where services can be are planned for in the future, and including this area. So that's really a summary of what is stated in the comprehensive plan related to the urban utilities. And then the zoning regulations kind of stack on top of that talk about utilities in a number of areas in zoning ordinance, specifically in 951. And talks about the city of Baxter having a long-standing regulation of allowing development only when municipal services are provided. And that same section states that no subdivision rezoning, new construction shall be permitted unless each lot has access to city sewer and water as designated by the zoning districts. And then looking at this specific property on Inglewood and Pine Beach, that property is zoned CI, Annexed Commercial Industrial, and that zoning district specifically allows new development with public sewer and water. So the zoning ordinance very clearly requires sewer and water. And then in addition to the city code having those requirements, there's also an entire sewer and water system that the city has planned for over many years and maintains and operates. So the city has a sewer and water system, occupies 75 miles of sanitary sewer and 100 miles of water main in the city. We have a water treatment plant, and we have rights to sewer capacity with Brainerd Public Utilities. So we have an entire system of municipal sewer and water that is designed and built to service all the areas within our urban expansion area. So the city's entire system is set up based on the foundational plan of the comp plan, its regulations, its policies, and all relates to the overall system of being serviced by sewer and water. One item I wanted to mention here is the city did recently defend a lot of these policies with a request. Well, we commented publicly on a request by Crow Wing County for consideration of a zoning change on 77 on Pine Beach Road as recently as this year, and we illustrated a lot of the city's points that we made in that comment letter are directly related to this specific area and environmental reasons for supporting commercial development on services and not with private systems. I'll go through those items in our findings at the end. Getting back to the subject property, the property that is in question was annexed into the city in 2015. Just going through that annexation a little bit, the city agreed to an orderly annexation of unorganized territory in 2015. It was related to Inglewood Drive. For the council's recollection, that roadway was built to a 10-ton standard with specifications consistent to the road that's to the south within the city limits of Baxter, south of White Road. And since the road after construction functions more like an arterial roadway rather than an unorganized territory township road, the city agreed to take over responsibility of Inglewood Drive to allow that road to be constructed as it is today. And with the agreement with Inglewood Drive, the properties around that got annexed. And you can see the annexed area from 77 here, and this is Inglewood Drive kind of in the center of the property. So again, Mr. Bircher's properties are here and up here in this upper left-hand corner of the map. So when you annex properties into a city, the city is given a period of time to go through and update its comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance related to the annexed area to establish regulations for the property, and we did do that. We went through a public process for the comprehensive plan amendment first, and that process was concluded by establishing a future land use guiding for the property, and that went through a public process. Specifically, there are properties on the north end of the site that were all developed or guided as commercial and industrial. There were, I think, close to 15 properties that were guided commercial and industrial along County Road 77 and Inglewood Drive. And those are all the properties identified in this purple color. Following the comprehensive plan amendment, the city kicked off a zoning process, but before we concluded the zoning process, the city also proceeded with a feasibility study on what it would take in terms of a project to accomplish providing utilities to this north end of the property or of the annexed area into the city, specifically this area right here. The feasibility study was completed to establish what project would be needed to service all of these properties and what the associated costs would be. And that feasibility study was completed in 2016, previous to the zoning getting approved for the property. Once the feasibility study was completed, the city did zone the properties into similar CI Annex Commercial and Industrial Zoning District for the subject properties. And you can see Mr. Bircher's properties, these three here on Inglewood, and again, the other two properties on Pine Beach Road in the upper left corner. I said 15 properties, I'm sorry, 14 properties were zoned commercial industrial. So the area is now fully zoned, it's fully planned in the comprehensive plan. And evaluating the request, we put together a number of findings in the memo, some of which I've already covered, so I'll breeze through those really quick, but I wanted to also take a minute to talk about a couple of the others that I haven't talked about yet. So really looking at the findings here, it's really staff's position on the policies relating to municipal utilities. The first item here is that the city's comprehensive plan, growth plan, and zoning ordinance establish that the city's planning regulations are to follow for sequential city growth with urban utilities. We already talked about that with the comprehensive plan. We also talked about that the city's entire infrastructure system is based on a plan for new developments to be added to the city with sewer and water. We've covered those two already. We've covered that the city did prepare a feasibility study to understand the costs and to add utilities to the area in question. Another point to that is we are prepared to move forward with those utility construction upon petition. So that is available as an option for property owners. One other item that I haven't covered is regarding precedent setting. It's a factor that the council definitely should be considering with your evaluation of this topic. Specifically, if the city were to accommodate the request as described and planned or amended its ordinances and policies to allow for commercial or industrial development on well and septic, there's a precedent-setting concern there from a staff perspective anyway, where other developers would object or challenge other areas of the city where city sewer and water is required, which is currently everywhere in the city. So we've identified a few areas that we quickly came up with that are commercial areas that are currently unserviced, specifically the area north of Menards, east of Nabotny Road, the area south and west of Jack Pine Brewery, which is south of Hastings Road, and the area south of Hastings Road along Evergreen Drive. Those are three areas, larger areas that are currently unserviced, other property owners that are in the same situation. Another area I wanted to talk about is regarding code requirements. Code requirements, there's a few things that I wanted to make sure we talk about. So the city does require compliance with Minnesota State building codes, septic codes, fire codes, and other city policies and ordinances. Because we do that, if we were to go to a commercial system that allows for well and septic for commercial development, the city would have to forego some fire code requirements, which we currently do not forego, namely fire hydrants and potentially fire suppression systems. So fire hydrants are very difficult to achieve with private wells, and fire suppression systems are possible to construct to meet fire code requirements, but many times require tanks, pumps, and those tanks, whether they're above or below ground, this is an arena that we are currently not, don't have regulations for. So that's an important factor to the city because the city is committed to following those codes. So we need to make sure we factor that in when considering going to well and septic. Let's see. One other thing is to achieve that code compliance with, say, a fire suppression system, so sprinklering a building, those systems may also require water pressure that may require, in some cases, multiple wells to be drilled. So there's costs that are not perhaps envisioned that would be there if we choose to stay current with codes. and establish those requirements with a private system. So those are all factors as well. The other thing that that I wanted to mention is that, and it relates to the letter that we did send to the county, which is relating to some of the environmental concerns. We stated some concerns about this specific area of the city having a very high water table. In many areas of this part of the city, water tables within a couple feet of the ground surface. And so when you're talking about septic systems, you'd have to be requiring mound systems, creating a higher separation so that you don't have those systems near the water table. We require a 3-foot vertical separation from modeled soils. And we currently require that of low floor elevations, but it would be a whole nother evaluation with septic systems and also potentially fire suppression tanks. If people are hoping to bury those underground, we would potentially end up with those above ground due to the water table in this area. Another thing that is related to this request that we wanted to make sure is put forward is the comment letter also talked about some environmental concerns that we have related to the area. Specifically, we've had flooding in recent years. We've had high water in the red sand and white sand lakes area. And in addition to that, and that's just downstream from this area. And we commented on that to the county when they were considering that proposal to rezone, I think it was 1.5 miles along Pine Beach to commercial, and seemingly would have brought with it the private systems. So we've been upfront, we've been open and upfront about our interests in servicing commercial development with municipal systems, especially in this area. So with that, we do not see any compelling reasons to support private systems for commercial at this time. And I guess with that, what we're hoping is that the city council at the conclusion, whether it's tonight or in the future, depending on the discussion here, we're requesting that the council determine if it wants to continue supporting the system that I've described here tonight, or if you'd like to go in a different direction. The request that you heard from Mr. Bircher was a comment in a letter from public comments, so no code requirement or code amendment request has been submitted at this point. So really, this is a discussion that we're putting forward based on the discussion that got brought to us, and just wanted to describe the city system as best we could in a short amount of time. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Council questions or comments?
One question, just out of curiosity, the way you were describing the city's compliance with state building fire septic codes, and then we have Baxter ordinances. Is it actually optional to comply with state building fire and septic codes, or was that just, I mean, some jurisdictions may not have the capacity to
Right.
enforce such codes, but I'm assuming
Yeah,
whether
this-
you do or not, you're supposed to follow those.
Right, the city has elected to adopt those state regulations. All developers are supposed to follow, for example, the Minnesota State Building Code, regardless of where they're at in the state. You know, that's based on their license. I think that's important to point out. But it is up to a city to determine if it's going to have a building official that gets certified as Baxter's building official, a fire inspector that gets certified as a fire inspector for the city, and same thing with septic. Our building official is currently our fire inspector, is currently our septic inspector, and also is our building official regarding the building code. He happens to have all three of those certifications, but yet we elect to follow those through a permit and inspection process.
Just want to add that the state statute mandates communities up 2,500 or more in population to have a designated individual or contract the services out for making sure that
think, like Josh said, excuse me, it's good to review these and go through these every once in a while, especially with newer people coming and going. It's a good idea. Back to the basic, I explained how we got here. It was just arbitrary. It was based on quite a few years of a lot of, I think, due diligence and meetings and input, and that's how we got here. So next steps, Brad, you want to summarize or?
Yeah, at the end of the memo, it gives indication that we're looking for some response back from the council as to do you still support the city's goals and objectives or policies in regards to development and the requirement of sewer and water to facilitate urban, development, or would you like to have us start going through an amendment process to formally review those policies? So we're looking for a directive or feedback from the council as to, do you support those policies, or do you want to have more in-depth conversation about maybe veering in a different direction?
Thoughts, comments?
I support the policies as they are right now.
So, we don't make motions in workshops, if you're looking for motions or honors.
No, we're just looking for the consensus or opinion. If silence is the overwhelming response, then we would take that as that the council supports the current position or current policies, and we would take that as the directive as to not to spend any additional time on this and inform Mr. Berger of the city's decision not to look into this further in depth, so.
I agree with our existing policies.
Not seeing anything compelling that would lead me to disagree with that statement.
It still does not preclude anybody from making an application, taking a stab at it.
Yep, no, absolutely. This is just our position, your position of support of the existing policies. If somebody wants to challenge it, they have the right to do so, especially with anything related to zoning or planning. In this particular case, it'd be a code amendment. But as you know, in other cases, it may be a zoning change, it may be a variance, but here, the applicable section, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Doty, it would be a code amendment.
Yeah, it'd be a code amendment to the zoning ordinance, but it would also really might need to be a comprehensive plan amendment as well as some of those statements that say all, so I would envision it would be a comprehensive plan amendment in the zoning ordinance or various code amendments to establish something different.
No different than, for example, Gracewood. Our comprehensive plan had identified that that'd be for office use, I believe it